Remote Caminos. Well, remoter Caminos. Maybe if you've walked one of the more popular ones before, you're thinking about trying a more remote one. That's what we're going to talk about this week, coming right up. So this week's video came about by kind of accident. So Peter, this is for you. So who is Peter? Peter's one of the subscribers on the channel, and Peter and I just spent an hour and a half over a cup of coffee because Peter also lives in Sydney. And Peter has walked the Camino Frances before and is seriously considering the Via de la Plata. So he wanted to kind of pick my brains on the VdlP. And we went for an hour and a half, and Peter, thanks for your questions. You asked some really great questions. And I thought I should actually make a video about this because lots of other people are probably thinking those same sort of questions. So let me just give you a little bit of background. So as you know, prior to last year, I had only walked the Camino Frances. I've done that two and a half times. And then last year I walked the Via de la Plata, Camino Invierno, and the Fistera Muxia. And so that was my first opportunity to walk one of the more remote Caminos. I mean, there are others that are a lot more remote than the Via de la Plata. And I had gone through a lot of research, and Peter does a lot of research on his Caminos as well. And it was, I knew it was going to be very different to the Frances. It was different in a few different ways, if that makes sense. And so I thought I would share with you what I just shared with Peter this morning over a coffee. So just to put this into context, Peter, rather like me, likes to walk on his own, but likes a little bit of company. He tends to prefer private accommodation, although happy to sort of mix it up with albergues and things like that. I'm becoming a bit of an albergue convert myself, and likes to keep his distances down to about 20 to 25 k's. So, Peter, that's pretty much what I did. So let me share some thoughts on, so this is based around my experience only on the Via de la Plata, but it'll help you maybe get your thinking around what if I was to walk a more remote Camino, and this video is specifically about the VdlP. So I'm going to share some images while we're going through this, and I'll just sort of number the images to make sure I can follow them while I'm editing. What sort of things come up in people's mind, and what sort of questions did Peter ask? So distances, first of all. Let's just put a map up on the screen of the Via de la Plata. And the thing I wanted to point out here is not just the overall distance, but there are options. So we're starting down in the south in Sevilla. I did meet people who started before that. People start down in Cadiz, but I started in Sevilla, where most people start. And then basically you're heading north, and you're going through some amazing places, like, let me look closer at the screen, Merida, Cáceres, Salamanca, Zamora, all sorts of incredible places. And then you'll notice there's a fork in the path as you get to the north. So what most people do on the Via de la Plata is they take that left fork, they go west onto the Camino San Andres, and that way they follow then into Santiago. So again, I'm just mentioning this so that you understand where these thoughts are coming from. I didn't go that way, I went north. So I continued north for 4 days to Astorga. I walked 3 days on the Camino Frances to Ponferrada, and then I branched down onto the Camino Invierno, which does meet up with the Camino San Andres a couple of days out from Santiago. So funnily enough, I met a couple of people who had gone west. So I'd gone north, they'd gone west, and I did meet a couple of people that I had met on the Via de la Plata. So that's kind of the route to get that fixed in your mind. Ignore that number that's coming up on my copy of Google Maps. It's saying 1,200 and something kilometres. It's because it's not actually following the Camino. I just wanted to create a map that was representative, and it's going to Santiago and then coming back again. On this next image, just have a look at a snapshot from Gronza. This is my favourite Camino app, one that I use a lot for my planning. So if you go to Gronza and you go onto the paths and you pick the Silver Way, you can see all the sort of various stages on this. I forget how many stages there are. I think it's 37 stages, you know, whatever a stage is, on the Via de la Plata, and that's going on the western route to Santiago. I planned for 55, so I'm a slow coach. So that's the routes, if you want to get that in your head. The terrain is quite different as well, and I'll show you some pictures of that. But just before we get off the distances, one of the things that Peter and I were talking about quite a lot was daily distances. And there's a couple of things to take note of there. One, if you want to keep your distances down to 20 or 25, there's a couple of sections where it's hard to do that. You need to sort of use your imagination a bit. You know, even to the extent of sort of taxiing forward and then back again, or maybe, you know, skipping 10Ks to make a really long day a bit shorter, that type of thing. So Gronza will help you with that. I use that extensively to work out my stages, so I can say, you know, okay, that'll be 20Ks, and then I can click on the town and see what accommodation's there and so on. So really, really great tool. While we're talking about Gronza, and I have to thank Linda, who I met walking the VdlP, for this tip. And in fact, Linda gave me this printout. So this is a printout from Gronza. And you can see that Linda had printed 3 of the sort of daily stages per page. And this was fantastic because I made notes on this. You can see I've scribbled all over it. Because as I'm going along, you know, I'll be thinking, oh, where am I going tomorrow? And I'll be looking at the towns, and then, you know, I like to book one day ahead, so I'll be ringing somewhere, and I can note down where I've booked and their phone number and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Linda. That was a really great tip, and I now do it. So I've got one here for the Invierno and one for Fistera, and I go on, and I'm just doing one for Madrid for next year. I know you can do all this on your phone, but it's nice to actually sit over dinner, you know, with that sort of printout and sort of plan your day and make notes and things like that. So I was detracting again. So what I was saying with Peter was that it does require a little bit more care on a route like the VdlP, because some of the stages might be, say, 30Ks, because there's literally, you know, there's one village, there's another one, and they're 30Ks apart. And what can happen on the VdlP is that you end up doing shorter days as well. So for example, there might be a stage that's 35, but you can break it into a 20 and a 15. So you might want to walk more than 15, but you got no option. That's how you can break it up. And I was showing Peter on my printout today, you know, it's like, oh, well, that was a 12 and a 15 because I couldn't do a 29 or whatever it was. So the stages can be a little bit longer, but also you've got to kind of plan ahead a little bit more. I mean, this is me. I'm a bit of an over planner, but I like to go on the Camino kind of knowing what all my options are, and I've got a little bit of a plan that I can fall back on. Don't misunderstand me. When I'm walking, I'm totally freewheeling, but you know, I like to know what my options are up front and how I'm particularly going to tackle some of these long days. So yeah, that's a little bit different. Peter was also asking about the time of year. So I set out in late March. I did quite a bit of research on the weather and climate and came to the conclusion that before early March it was going to be a little bit wet. If I didn't leave by late March, I was going to be getting into some hot weather. Obviously, you know, you can't predict the weather, but I was very lucky. I had great weather and no rain, so I left Seville in the last week of March. Part of the reason for that also was I wanted to avoid Semana Santa, the big Easter parades in Seville, because Seville is just nuts apparently during Semana Santa, just packed with people. You know, everything's booked out. I'm not a sort of crowds person, so I didn't want to get involved in that. But what was really good is that because I was a week ahead of it, so I left Seville a week before Semana Santa, I actually caught Semana Santa parades in a lot of the smaller towns and villages, which was really nice to see the sort of the local stuff. So that was the time of year. The terrain. We spent a long time this morning talking about the terrain. It is pretty different. And I've said this a few times, that if you like the Meseta on the Camino Frances, you will love the VdlP, because most of it is like that. So I've got a whole day-by-day video series of the VdlP here on the channel, so I'll put a link to that down below, but I'll just share some photos here. And so we're up to slide 3. This is on the way to Castilblanco, and I took a picture of that one because I love the sign that said Santiago de Compostela, 927 kilometers. Anymore, cheer up. I think I only saw 2 or 3 signs like that with how far Santiago was, but I thought it was quite funny. So obviously it wasn't far from Santiago, so from Seville, sorry. So pretty common sort of terrain on slide 4 here. I love this photograph, and you've probably seen this one if you've seen VdLP photographs. It's one of the most sort of common scenes that's photographed, I think, on the VdLP. And it really is quite typical of the terrain. I mean, it's beautiful. It's farming country, you know, a few trees, no shade though. On a couple of days you are walking through forests, but I love these wide open landscapes. Here on slide 5, this is a little bit more desolate. This is just north of Cáceres. And in fact, in the distance, you can't quite see it, it's Casa de Cáceres, the town that we're heading for. That's quite a common sort of landscape on the Via de la Plata, which brings me to equipment. So I was saying to Peter, umbrella, I'll come to that in a minute. On slide 6 here, a lot greener. We're getting further north here because that's Salamanca in the distance. So you're starting to get a sense of what the landscape is like. Certainly as far as I walked, so I walked up as far as Granja before, you know, at the fork. Everybody else kind of went west on the Sanabros. I went north to Astorga. Certainly as far as I went, the VdLP is pretty flat. I mean, there was a couple of sections with hills, but nothing major. I think on that western part, going then towards Santiago, it does get a bit more hilly, but I had gone to Astorga and then west on the Invierno. So most of it for me was pretty flat. And then here on slide 7, I think this landscape is referred to as Dehesa. You know, sort of scrubland, lots of rocky boulders and things like that. Beautiful to walk through. You know, and that's the main path of the Camino there in this photo. You know, it's like not many people walk it. I think I was telling Peter this morning, I worked out that in my sort of day slug of pilgrims, if you like, I think I worked out there was 14 people. So, you know, at any one time walking a section, there was probably 12 to 14 people, and you might see a few of them. But you certainly don't see many people. And then here on slide 8, I just had to include one sort of early morning. So that was another tip that I shared this morning, and that, you know, Peter was asking about company, and, you know, he likes to walk alone, but it's nice to have a bit of company in the evening. You know, that's exactly what I feel. And I mentioned to him that I didn't really see any pilgrims for the first week. And he went, oh, is it like that all the way? I said, no, because a strange thing happened. After about a week, it was warming up a bit, and I thought I would try starting in the dark. You know, I'd never really been a fan of that, but I started out generally sort of 45 minutes to an hour before dawn. And suddenly I started meeting people, because all the others were doing that. All the others, the other 10 or so, you know, within a day of me. So I'm not sure where this one is. I think it was leaving Fuenterroble. So early morning starts were great. So let me just check my list. Terrain, we've talked about. Gear. So Peter was asking, is there any particular gear for a Camino like this? No, I mean, I carry the exact same gear regardless of the Camino. But if I was to say, is there anything particular that I was glad that I took because of this Camino, I'll just show this photograph here, which was taken by the lady of the maps who I was walking with that day. There's a couple of things to note. One is the umbrella. I always carry an umbrella because I'm generally walking in the warmer months, and it's not to keep the rain off, it's to keep the sun off. And what I found, particularly on this Camino, is that although the temperatures weren't particularly high, the sun was brutal. I don't know what it is with the sun in Spain. And I come from Australia where, you know, we get strong sun. Generally, I would be using the umbrella from 10 or 11 in the morning. Generally when the temperature was getting up to, I mean, I had beautiful clear blue skies, so the sun was pretty hot. The temperature might be up to about 22 and I'd pull my umbrella out. And then it seemed to reach a peak at about 4 p.m., 4 p.m., sometimes 25, 26. I was really glad of that umbrella and I used it most days. It just provides a lovely bit of shade. It knocks the temperature down a bit. It means you're not having to wear a hat. Your head's not getting sweaty. You get a nice breeze through your hair. And it just makes everything a lot more comfortable. The other thing I'll mention just on that photograph is that you'll notice I've got two quite large water bottles. So we talked a bit this morning about water. You do have to plan to carry your food and water for your whole day's walking. So I was generally, because I'm walking 20 to 25 Ks, I'm generally carrying 2 litres of water. A couple of days I had a little bit extra as well. Did I ever run out of water? Yeah, one day I ran a bit short because I hadn't taken my sort of full load of water, I think. So I would say plan to carry your water for the day, but obviously if you're looking at your map, you know, for your next day's walking, and you can see that you're going through quite a large town, then you're going to be able to pick up some water. But if there's no large towns that are going to have shops open or whatever, plan to carry your water for the day. Water fonts, I don't remember seeing many on the VdlP, maybe 3. I just didn't plan for them because I didn't see many. So, and I just got used to carrying the water for the day. And certainly a litre per 10 kilometres worked out really well for me. So in terms of special gear, that was really about it. And I did mention that I took a lightweight sleeping bag, a really lightweight one. It's about 400 grams. I had planned to take a sleeping bag and a sleeping bag liner. In the end, I ditched the liner. I mailed it forward with a few other items. I got to Seville and thought, I've just got too much stuff. So I mailed that forward. But why the sleeping bag? Because I knew there were certain sections where I would have to use albergues, but also I planned on this Camino to intentionally stay in lots of albergues because I wanted to try different ones and get that experience. And the sleeping bag I find just helps. You know, you don't have to use the blankets that are provided and things like that. Although generally the bedding and everything in the albergues was really good. There's really only a few that were a bit so-so. So in terms of equipment, nothing really special. Just plan for being able to carry lots of water and dealing with the sun. What are we up to time-wise? Got to watch that. I'll run out at 30 minutes. That's water. Yeah, you know, planning ahead. We talked a fair bit about that. So I sort of got into the routine each evening of planning my next day. So it would be, where am I going to stay? And I'll be sending a WhatsApp message or something to book somewhere. If it was like a Donativo albergue, I can't book that anyway, so it's no problem. But what I'm also looking at, and it's a bit like playing chess, I'm kind of thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. So if I'm walking to this particular town tomorrow, or village, I'm also looking on Google Maps to see what's in the village. Are there any bars that would have food? Is there a shop? You know, I want to know if I can top up. And then I'd look the day beyond as well. I don't want to sound like I'm paranoid here, but if you're not doing that, you can end up arriving in a village where there's no shop to buy food, so you've got no snacks for the following day, and then potentially the day after that. You know, so you need to think a couple of days ahead. I mean, there's always ways around these things, but you know, why make life difficult for yourself? It's not hard to just plan a couple of days ahead. So Google Maps is great for that because you can look at the village and then you can, you know, tap in cafe and it'll bring the cafes up and that kind of stuff. So always be aware of where you're going to be sort of picking up your next batch of snacks. You don't need to carry a lot of food, just something to nibble during the day, and generally like an emergency meal, just in case you get in somewhere and you can't get a meal or something like that. I mentioned to Peter this morning, I think only twice I wasn't able to get breakfast, and so I was able to, you know, have my emergency snack for breakfast. Okay, the other thing I mentioned was I got into the habit when I arrived at my accommodation of running through a number of questions. You wouldn't necessarily need to do this on the Camino Frances, for example, but let's say I'm checking into a hostel or an albergue. First thing I'll be asking is, not necessarily in this order, but where can I get lunch? So that's actually a critical point. You can forget pilgrim menus and all that kind of stuff. They don't exist on the VdlP and these more remote Caminos because there's not that many pilgrims to make it worthwhile doing. So you're eating like the locals. So my general plan was to have my main meal during the day, which is the menu del dia, which is served in bars and cafes. That generally is served up until about 3. So I would make sure that I'm arriving by 1 or 2 o'clock, get checked in, plenty of time to sort of freshen up and get my lunch. Certainly don't push, I wouldn't be wandering in to order a menu del dia much past 2:30 because you'll find you probably missed the last orders. So that's, in terms of meals. As when I come in, I'll be asking, where can I get a meal? And very often it will be where I'm staying. I want to know where I can do my washing and hang the clothes out. Now and again, if it was a big enough town, I'd say, is there I forget the name in Spanish now, but the laundromat, is there one of those? Nice sort of once a week to wash your clothes properly. I'd be asking if there's a shop. Be aware that in rural areas, the shops are probably going to be closed between 2 and 5, sort of siesta time. They might not be open every day of the week. So again, when I'm looking a day or two ahead on Google Maps, I'm looking for shops and see if I can get the opening hours. Google Maps is not always accurate, but it's not bad. It let me down a couple of times. And then the other sort of standard question would be, can I get breakfast where I'm staying? Is there a cafe that's open? Generally, I'm leaving pretty early in the morning. And what I found was that in most villages, there's usually one bar that's open early for the locals. So there'll be, farmers, whoever, going to work early in the morning. There's usually one bar somewhere that's open early and does breakfast. So that's it. Where can I get a meal? Where can I wash my stuff? Is there a shop? Where can I get breakfast? While we're talking about it, language. So I've been warned about this. Don't expect people to speak English on a Camino like the VdlP. Is it essential to know some Spanish? It helps. I mean, my Spanish is very, very minimal. I've had a few 1-hour lessons and a bit online, but I can, the extent of my Spanish is that at a push, I can call someone to book a room. I prefer to do it via WhatsApp. That's a bit easier, but if I have to, I can make a phone call and book a room. I can order meals, all the sort of day-to-day necessities. Where's that? Where's this? Where's the doctor? Whatever, I can get by. So if you can learn a little bit of Spanish, or a bit of Spanish prior to walking one of these more remote routes, then that's going to help a lot. The example I was sharing with Peter, which I had learnt prior to going, was that it's not like, for example, the Camino Frances, where you're going to go in and buy lunch and there's a menu and there's pictures and you can point to it. There are no pictures. There may be a menu. It's only going to be in Spanish generally. So you need to be able to sort of interpret the menu. And sometimes there isn't even a menu, So you'll be asking, can I get a meal? And they'll say, yes. And they'll say, what have you got? And they're going to rattle it off. So you've got to be, ready to pick up on what they've got. Oh, pollo, they've got chicken, they've got whatever. So a little bit of Spanish will help. Of course, you can fall back on Google Translate. And I did a few times, but I think it's a bit impolite if you've got to use that all the time. Just try and get some basic Spanish going. Booking accommodation. I mentioned I booked the first 2 or 3 days just to get me going, and then generally booked 1 day ahead. Not always. Sometimes it was a donativo, so I couldn't. Accommodation. So Peter's a little bit like me, tended towards private accommodation with the odd albergue. As I said, I'm starting to really like the albergue scene. On a route like that, you need to expect to use albergues. Not all the time, but there'll be some villages where that's the only option. And so, in your gear and stuff like that, you want to think about that. He asked if there was a couple that are really worth staying at. There are absolutely on the VdlP. I would mention the one in Alcoscar, and I'll put links down below on this one. That's a church-run one, and also the one in Fuenteroble run by Father Don Blas. Both of those have a wonderful Donativo, albergue, Camino community feel to them, you know, really good. Where to stop if you're planning rest days and things like that. So I'm watching the clock, I'm going to run out. You're going through some fantastic old cities, Salamanca, Merida, Zamora. They're all worth, you know, spending time in, or at least walking a short day so you can get half a day to look around. I'll mention some safety things. So we talked about this over coffee. You know, I just wanted to stress the point that be careful. If you're out on your own, some days you won't see a soul all day. And, you know, it's little things, like when you're about to scramble up those rocks to take a photo, just think, you know, what if I slip and break a leg? You know, you're going to be lying there till someone comes past tomorrow. But in that vein, I would recommend that you put Alert Cops on your phone. Just look for the app, Alert Cops. It's put out by the Spanish police. It's very self-explanatory. If you get into trouble, you can hit that and an English speaker will answer the phone for you. People who can speak English. So that's worth having. We also talked about, you know, signage and maps. You're not going to find all the sort of yellow arrows that you do on the Camino Frances. It's quite well signed. I didn't rely on them that much, to be honest. You know, there's pretty much only one way to go. I had my printouts, so I knew where I was going, but I also used extensively Maps.me on my phone, and I would have a GPS track on that. So literally that's running constantly, and I just pull that out of my pocket and I can see exactly where I am in relation to the Camino. But there's lots of Camino apps that will do that for you as well. It's just, it would be pretty easy to wander off and take the wrong track and walk a bit further than you need to. I've talked about language, expect that no one's going to speak English. I've talked about meals, there's no pilgrim menus, so maybe make your main meal the sort of during the day, the menu del dia, sort of nice big lunch, and then in the evening have a snack or something like that. There we go. That was a quick gallop through, and I managed to just do it before the camera runs out at 30 minutes. So great to meet you this morning, Peter, and hear about your tales of walking the Camino Frances and walking to Everest Base Camp and all that stuff. And I hope our chat and this video will help you with your planning for the Via de la Plata. I'm kind of applying all of this to planning our next Camino, which will be the Camino Madrid. And Pat will be coming on that one with me, so I have to make sure it's planned very well. Yeah, I'm applying all the sort of principles that I've just talked about here. So thanks for watching. Any other tips that you've got, if you've walked more remote Caminos, do add them down below. Any questions you've got, I'm more than happy to answer those as well. Bye for now.